So I'm really excited to talk about a really big topic for me, this idea of job search and job change and helping people navigate those transitions. And so for this conversation, I invited a good friend here along with me, Stephanie White. And Stephanie, maybe introduce yourself first and tell us who you are and how you got into enablement.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So, Steph White, in some circles, I'm known as the Canadian Enablement Steph. Always tongue in cheek with that one. I'm in the camp of former marketer turned seller, turned sales leader, then turned enabler, kind of by accident. It has been about 7 years now, which is pretty wild. I'm a builder. I love to come in and build things from the ground up when it comes to enablement and rebuild along the way. And one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about when it comes to enablement is connecting people with ideas, with each other, with opportunities, which is part of how we've hit it off so well, of course, Dave. And really just try to help us all be our best. So that's a quick little overview of me.
Spoken like a true enablement person. And I want to, and just to kind of bring things to current events. So walk us through, just from a job perspective, what happened over the past couple months with you.
Right into it. So yeah, I mean, I think not dissimilarly than a lot of people in the last 12 to 18 months, I went through a riff. It was about 2-ish months ago now, give or take. And, it was one of those things for me that, fortunately, I was in a scenario where I saw the writing on the wall. So I wasn't blindsided by it. And it did give me a bit of a head start to be able to do some things in the background to prepare. But, I went through this riff um, and really tried to think through what was the next best step for me in my career. And the emphasis there was on the for me, not in the for my career part of that sentence. Um, and so it was a really good reflection time. I think something we'll probably chat about right now. But yeah, went through a riff, took a hot minute to relook at what matters to me, what I'm passionate about in enablement, what's out there, and what I wanted my next chapter to look like. So fast forward that 2 months and change, and I am well into my ramp now in a new role, leading sales enablement.
And so just to do the math on this, your time unemployed was roughly a month-ish. What was it?
Yeah, so I riffed in February, and it was, I think, right at the end of February or like the first day or two of March when I accepted an offer and I started 2 weeks later.
And just for perspective, as one who talks to people all the time in that same situation, that is exceptionally fast. And that's part of why I wanted to talk to you. And so I want to break this down because I think in knowing you and watching what you've done, you did a lot of things right that I think people can learn from. And I want to give the caveat or disclaimer that this is not a formula that if you do the following 3 steps, you're going to have a job in a month. It doesn't always work that way. This is not that. But I think you did a lot of things right that I wanted to share with the community. And I want to parse it out. So let's sort of take a first part first. What about things you did before the riff, even before you had the hint that there might be a riff. And I'll even say I've been doing this for a while, and maybe even 2-ish years ago, you were not on my radar. I didn't know who you were. And then out of nowhere, truly, you became this presence and this ubiquitous person all over LinkedIn and things you did. So I want to talk about, well before the riff, what were the things that you were doing that you think ultimately played a factor in a relatively quick hire?
Yeah. So, I mean, frankly, I basically didn't exist in any of the groups or communities a little over 2 years ago. I was just kind of in my pocket up in Canada. What's up, everybody? Doing my own thing and figuring out all my own stuff along the way. And, really having to stumble and fumble and try everything by myself. I didn't have a community to go to. Um, so, yeah, it was about 2 years ago. I started engaging with folks and following folks. And like, to be fully transparent to everybody, yes, I am an extrovert, obviously. But I had a really big issue with imposter syndrome when I first started meeting new people. Here I am up in Canada. I don't know these people. I worked for a small company that most people had never heard of. Who was I to be coming into these conversations? What kind of street cred did I have? I'm in the Canadian market, insert some of the stereotypes here and not understanding global business. And so I really struggled initially with, I don't have a place in the broader enablement community. It was kind of a, there's them and then there's me by myself over here. And so it was about 2 years ago, I started following a couple of folks who, when I had seen video of them, either because they were doing a talk or they posted something in a chat somewhere, I literally smiled by myself sitting at my laptop. And I was like, I want to go meet these people. And one of the first people that actually popped up on my radar was Steph Zarabian, who I think quite a few folks know. Shout out to Steph. And she just had this ball of energy. And she was talking about how we can innovate in so many ways in enablement. And it just started to light this excitement in me at a different level than I had had trying to do everything by myself. So I reached out to Steph. We actually recorded our first live conversation. It was hilarious. She turned it into a podcast. It was great. And from there, I was like, okay, this fueled me. I got inspired. I learned some stuff along the way. These are my people. And I started making a conscious effort to every single month have one live conversation with someone I didn't know and make one new connection in a meaningful way. And I started small. Um, I did not start posting on LinkedIn right away. In fact, my first month, my goal was once a week for 4 weeks. That's it. And it literally, I would write something and I would throw my phone down and I was like, I'm not going to look at it. I don't want to know if people don't like it or like it. Don't do that, by the way. But it was really an uncomfortable process for me to get started. Why does that matter? Well, because I think for some people now who haven't been engaging with the community, it's easy to look at other folks, even like you and I right now, and say, okay, yeah, but that's easy for you. It may have been for you, Dave. It wasn't for me. It was like, right? It was something I had to challenge myself for. So I started small and I set my own goals to meet and interact with new people and build those new relationships. I did that through a couple of communities. I did it with SEC for one. So Sales Enablement Collective was the first one I got involved with. And it was really those one-to-one interactions. That started to build up. And then it became, okay, 3 or 4 months in, I was like, I'm going to go to one live workshopping event where there's, 15, 20 people and I can meet more people and meet more people. And it just started to fuel me to want to learn and grow and develop. And I started to grow so much faster on my own as a result of being part of the community that I think that really was kind of the tipping point for me saying, no enabler goes alone. And I'm in this too.
That's great. I'll give a shout out to the book Atomic Habits, because I feel like what you were doing was essentially putting the building blocks in place to ensure that you would hit these goals. And so I think, again, those just very, very basic. I'm going to post once a week and I'm going to one new connection and like I'm going to go to one conference. And I think those, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, basic habits can yield. Now, again, not to give away the ending here, but your profile snowballed very, very rapidly. And you went from, again, this corner of Canada that nobody knew to this truly, and again, this is in all sincerity, like a big presence and a thought leader. And it's really amazing to watch such growth in such a short period of time. And I think, as we'll talk about later on, I think that probably helped get the ground fertile for job searching. And so that's interesting. And so you built this presence and you built these authentic connections across the enablement ecosystem, broadly speaking. And then life was great. And then a riff happened. And so as that started to happen, you probably had to shift gears a little bit and you so took a breath, took a minute, and then it's like, okay, here we go. At that point, what did you start to do for your job search?
So one other thing I'll call out is because I'm in the camp of former seller, I was very much used to tracking my success. Right. I was like, oh, this is how I did against my quota last month, last quarter, last year. Right. I kept that up in my enablement programs. So at the end of every month over the last few years, anytime I would do a dashboard report for my senior leadership team, and I would say, here's how we move the dial
Yep.
on this key metric for the business by doing XYZ, I would write that down in my own personal wins file. And why that was important was because when it came time for me to update my resume after having been in a role for 2.5 years, you might sit there and go, okay, I just got riffed. I've been at this company for 2.5 years. Like, where do I even start? It was actually so easy because I opened my personal win document and it just became, what is it that I've been able to do in the last 2.5 years that I want to showcase to the world
Yep.
on this resume that I do now? So that took a lot of pressure off. So
Yep.
if for folks, if you don't have a win tracker of your own right now, go start it. Doesn't have to be fancy, literally just a Google Doc you can keep in your personal drive. That was super helpful. When my riff actually happened, I knew it was coming. And so I had been networking, I was having a lot of great conversations with folks that were at similar job levels to me, which was really good to get insight on what else was out there in the market and challenges and opportunities that other people were experiencing. But when my riff conversation happened, I wasn't, and it's happened to me multiple times in my career. I'll call this out. This last one, though, was different. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't devastated. I didn't feel powerless. I didn't feel scared. Um, was I sad? No question. I was sad to leave my team. I was sad, like, for a lot of reasons. But my initial feeling wasn't of being a victim. Because, in fact, what had happened over the last few years of me kind of cultivating this community and this network and this wins list that I kept for myself was two things. One, my self-esteem, and two, my self-confidence. So my own self-evaluation of my worth to a business started to weigh more in my mind than what my job title was or who was paying my paycheck. And so it was actually a really empowering moment and a really freeing moment to say, okay, you've made your choice. I'm no longer on your team. That's your choice, and that's okay.
Yep.
Now I get to decide what's next for me. And I was talking with somebody about this recently, so I shut my laptop down. It was like, oh, you're going to get your paperwork in the next whatever and come back to us in this amount of time. And I had this moment where I was like, cool. In my head, I was like, that's your timeline. It's no longer about you. As of right now, I actually no longer work for you. So I'm going to go do me right now. And I had a really nice lunch with my husband during the day, which I didn't normally get to do because I was always working. And I went for a super long run, which is something that I love to do. I know we share that, and I never have time for during the day. And I spent the rest of that day just taking it almost like a vacation day for, what do I want to do in this moment?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until the next day I actually went back and I opened up my laptop and I saw the paperwork and started dealing with that. But I kept it all on my terms, which was really empowering. So it was, okay, I have to do these things, right? You have to worry about health benefits and do this other stuff, do the paperwork, get the legal stuff done. But this time around, it was every morning is going to be focused on professional Stephanie. So that was job search, networking, doing the things. And every afternoon is going to be focused on personal Stephanie. And that was going to be running. I did wainscoting projects around my house, like was doing all kinds of stuff. I ran an obscene amount in that first week. And so what started to happen was professional Stephanie was getting the attention the couple hours a day to make sure I was out there. And I was really focused on networking to hear from other people what was happening in the market. What were they seeing? What were their trends? And personal Stephanie, rather than feeling beat up from the scenario, was actually starting to feel really healthy and balanced too, more so than I had in months while I was on the roll.
Yeah. I think I want to emphasize that point because this comes up a lot with people where I'll talk to them and they'll be like, I'm online from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. like it's my job. And I'm like, stop. And I make the point of, you can only do so much on LinkedIn in a given day. So, kind of bifurcate or split your day. And exactly what you said, like dedicate time every day or almost every day for your search and be heads down, turn off the distractions, and be focused and do the right activities. But the second part of the day, do things that fill your cup personally, and whether it's family or exercise, whatever it is, because again, you'll have diminishing returns kind of with your head in your laptop. So don't do that. And it's going to actually be, it's going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. And I also feel like if you have time off, like you had your lunch with your husband and your runs, like you, that time is a gift, and you want to have something to show for it. And whether it's around your house or personally, like you want to have some, here's what I did with my time off, because we don't often get large blocks of time off. And so I think the balanced approach to the job search is right. I think all play, not that productive. All LinkedIn networking stuff, not that productive. So I think finding the right balance is the key thing. And I want to go back and emphasize a point you made that I think is critically important a minute ago. That there was I was talking to somebody a while ago, and she was saying she was a manager of enablement team, and she said once a quarter she'd get her team into the conference room and lock them in there and say, all right, everybody, update your resume right now with what you did for the last quarter. And she forced her people to do that because, we all know this probably isn't our last job we're ever going to have. So we want to make sure we're memorializing those accomplishments. So you had this sort of the self-discipline to get those things written down and chronicle them as you went. And I think that's the right thing. And so if you're a manager, cool thing to do for your team. It shows you're investing in your people. But at a minimum, on your own, you really want to be doing those things because for the exact reason you said, those examples, those stories, those wins are the currency by which you get your next role. And if you don't have them at the ready, you don't, God forbid, you don't have the numbers anymore, and so you're trying to, was it 40% or 48%? I can't remember. It's been a couple of years. It gets very fuzzy and gets very hard. So if the more you can capture them as you go in semi-real time, that is a huge investment in your career. And so I think kudos to you for having your win sheet or whatever you called it along the way, because I think it was probably a very key thing for you to walk in with some confidence and also be crisp on your details.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, I learned that one the hard way. I've been through multiple rifts in my almost 20 years of working. Right. And so did I have that win tracker my first go round back in like 2010, when everything was falling from the sky? No, I didn't. And I had to learn that one the hard way.
Yeah.
So that is a great thing for people to be doing if they aren't already doing. And yeah, exactly what you said. It's got to be balanced. My husband, who is so cute, it was only a couple weeks that I was in between roles. And he said, you turn around to me one day. He's like, you are the busiest unemployed person I know. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're just constantly like on phone calls and texting with this person at this company and this over here. And then you're going to Home Depot and you're buying supplies for this project and this, because it really, for me, was this go around embracing, this is my opportunity for me to figure out what I want in my next chapter and really diving into that wholeheartedly.
And let's get tactical for a moment. So post riff, you're doing a lot of things, but tactically speaking, what were you doing? I heard you were texting and you're calling and you're doing all that stuff. But let's, like, how did you approach your search?
Yeah. Yeah. So my primary objective, and this actually aligns well with a lot of what you talk about, I have done enablement at enough companies to see what it means from a leadership team to make it successful or to be a hindrance to it. So what was most important to me when I was looking for a new role wasn't so much about the title. I knew two things. I knew I wanted to build stuff because that's what I do. And that's what I'm passionate about. And I knew I wanted to directly report to a leader that had a similar energy and passion, not just for making money, which, by the way, 100%, but also for developing their people. Like, truly gets up in the morning and is like, I'm going to help you absolutely crush it on this deal. And we're going to get it done. And you're going to become a superstar kind of mentality. And that's not the norm, right? So when I was networking with people, the questions I was really asking is, first and foremost, forget if there's a job opening. What companies do you know where there is a sales leader in place or a revenue leader? that has this kind of fire and passion. And I started following those companies and interacting with people at those companies. And then it was just a matter of, well, if there's going to be a role that fits for me at one of those, I'll start to hear about it now because I'm coming to understand some of the people
Yeah.
that are involved. But I had a very, very short list of companies that I was even willing to look at. Um, my new leader, shout out to him. He reached out to me after I had done a post online, and said, like, we had some shared people in common. So this is the beauty of a network for everybody. I'd never spoken to him directly. We had shared people in common. So we could both back channel each other, right?
Yeah.
Which is a very real thing. Everybody, we need to
Yeah.
know this. And he basically come out and said, listen, here's my vision of what enablement could and should be to support revenue teams that I lead. This is what I'm passionate about. Here's who I am as a person, like personally and professionally. Like, here's my jam. Does that align with you at all? And so our first conversation was a human to human conversation, not a here's a job offer. Do you tick 98% of the boxes?
Yep.
Um, and I find that when we have the opportunity to use our networks to make those first introduction meetings and have those first conversations, they tend to be less about the exact role and more about drivers, motivators, philosophies, energies, all those kinds of things that for me, I knew was going to be a deal breaker, whether I was interested in taking a new role or not. So yeah, I mean, tactically, I made a list of what my goals were for myself, the same way CEO does for a business. We're going to sell $70 million in this service this year. I was like, no. I knew what my floor was financially and title wise, but I knew what my goal was. I knew what good was going to look like to me. And I set a mission for myself and I put a line in the sand and I was like, here's what I'm willing to do for that goal. Here's how hard I'm willing to work. Here's the things I'm willing to do to continue to invest in myself. This is what I want for that. And so that kind of just became my own, you can call it a vision board, you can call it a goal that I was working towards, but it was really pretty simple. Work for somebody who believes in driving revenue through driving their people for good things and do some cool stuff along the way.
Yeah.
It was pretty simple for me.
And I'm going to get hyper tactical for a second here. So, because I think this is amazing how you and this CRO or head of revenue did not know each other, but yet you had friends in common or people in common. So, were you connected directly on LinkedIn, or did somebody you know comment on your post that he knew and therefore he saw? Like, how did that actually happen? Because that's a critical connective tissue here.
Yeah, so I think it was shared people had reacted or commented on my post. So by the way, here's another thing. The green banner. I did not do the green banner. Um, for me personally, it did not feel like the right thing to do. No judgment on it either way. It's
Yeah.
everybody's choice. I did a public coming out party. Hey, I've been riffed. But because, I was left after my riff call, I had this wins tracker and it was like multiple pages long. So instead of feeling powerless and kind of beaten up, I'm like looking at this thing. I'm like, man, look at all the cool stuff I did in the last 2.5 years. And so when I actually went to do my kind of coming out message on LinkedIn, I was like, so I'm no longer with the organization. Like that's the headline. But I'm actually super excited for my next chapter because here's all the stuff I did. And so for me, it was really important to be able to publicly share what I was personally feeling, which is like, listen, no harm, no foul. It's almost like a relationship it needed to end, right? It was just, this is no longer a fit.
Yeah.
That's okay. Best of luck to everybody there. No longer a good fit for me professionally for, the financial reasons of the rift that happens. Here's all the cool stuff I was able to do. Thank you very much, everybody along the way. Here's the cool stuff I want to do in the future. And so I think even being able to frame ourselves when we are ready to make that public statement as here's what I can do and here's what I love changes the narrative from something happening to you to things that you are doing outwardly.
Yeah. I think
So
I was going to say the thing that I'm struck by is just the mindset, and I think sometimes even the best of us, those who've been very senior, been doing this game for a long time, there's a riff, and there's this part of them that feels this shame or this embarrassment. They want to hunker down, and for the reason you said, they don't post it on LinkedIn, they don't change their banner, and they just sort of quietly email a few friends like, "Hey, if you hear anything, let me know," because they feel something about that. And I think the mentality that you did, I mean, just from the story you've told here today, directly impacted you getting the new job because you were public, you shared, and people saw, and that created a connection with a like-minded revenue leader.
mhm.
And then 2 months later, whatever, you're being onboarded. I think that mindset is key. And again, I think if you have a win sheet to refer back to, just like post up on the mirror every morning, like, I'm pretty good at what I do. I think even as silly as that sounds, but just the reinforcement of like, okay, this is not about me. This is not about my accomplishments. This is just, it's a business thing.
Yeah.
Cool. And now let me go do my magic somewhere else. And I think that mindset is more than admirable. I think it's advantageous, and I think it got you a job.
Well, and it did. And I think, it's, you've got to be, and again, listen, I was not this way my first riff, right? Like years and years ago, I cried it was not pretty. But this go round, it's like, no, you can go do that same magic somewhere else, right? So my message to folks on this is, just because it's somebody else's choice that you're no longer fit doesn't mean that you don't have huge value to you and to lots of other places out there, right? Um, it's mindset for sure is a big part of it. Absolutely. By the way, that post, I'm also very candid with people because I am not perfect at things either. That post started to go very fast, which was amazing. The response I got from people, my DMs blew up, the engagement blew up. There was a lot of comments. I actually had to turn my phone off and just not. And again, that was part of focusing on what's happening to me versus what can I control. I started feeling very overwhelmed in those first couple of hours as I saw, oh Lord, I never wanted to go viral. I certainly didn't want to go viral on like losing my job. That's not the way I wanted to come out to all these new people.
Yeah.
But, I did shut off my phone. And the next morning when I logged back in, I was like, there is a whole world of people out there that want to help, that know of great opportunities. And when they know who you are, what you're all about, and what you want to do to help drive businesses, it makes it a lot easier for them to be able to raise their hand and bring things to you. Hey, this opportunity is going to be coming up. It's not posted yet, but I think you'd be a good fit. Let me introduce you.
And I'm just imagining this having happened to Steph 2020,
Yeah.
right? The person before she came out and found her voice, right? Right, but like it would have been a very different experience. That, not that you had probably no connections, but it would have been sort of like kind of talking out into an empty forest of like, got laid off and no one's really responding because you didn't have that network built up yet, and it would have been a whole different thing.
Mm-hmm. And it was, I mean, I think like Steph 2021 Steph, I think had like, I don't know, 600 connections or something. And most of those were former
Yeah.
coworkers. Right. So I think it's an amazing platform to be able to start to share your voice and build connections with other people. For those of you that follow some sales folks on LinkedIn, Florin Tatula, some people will know as Sales Flow. He actually just hit, I think, 60,000 followers on just the LinkedIn platform yesterday. Shout out to Flo. He was a coworker of mine in 2021, and he was already getting his numbers up, and he was doing his thing on LinkedIn. And we actually had a conversation one day, and I was like, oh man, part of me wishes I could do that. But like, that's just, I'm over in the corner. I'm back of house. I help salespeople get in the limelight by closing the big deals. And kudos to him. He was like, there is no reason why that can't be you. The best time to start, yeah, was 5 years ago before the platform got busy. And just like planting trees, the next best time to start is now.
Yep.
So that would be my message to everybody. Yes, it's easy to go out and be like, sure, that's easy for this person to say. They have this network built up. But you build that network by starting to share your voice and who you are. And that's
Right.
how we make new friends and connections.
When it's a chicken or egg thing, but yeah, you start by posting, and then you have people who follow and listen. I think, and just, I don't want to derail things, but can you give your learnings about finding your voice? Because again, from one who maybe didn't have a voice to one who's found a megaphone, how did you find a voice that's both of value and also authentic?
Um, so my dear little friend imposter syndrome lets to come by a lot. And, for me, I'm always one of the first people to say, I don't have all the answers for this. I don't have all this. I'm not the best at these things. Um, what I found was when I first started actively paying attention to what people were posting on the platform, a lot of what people were posting at the time in my feed was, do these three things and you'll make $1 million this year in sales too. Or look at how awesome I am. Look at this great thing. And that's cool. That was how they chose to show up. But that wasn't me. And that's just not who I am now either. That's just not how I'm wired. And so my thought process was, if I'm sitting here reading this stuff, kind of going, come on, man, it's not that simple for everybody. There's got to be other people who feel like I do. And I got to try to find those people who are saying the things that I'm feeling too. And I just wasn't finding them.
Yeah.
And so my goal was, well, maybe if I start to show what I'm learning and how I'm stumbling and falling and the things that I struggle with, whether it's imposter syndrome going into a meeting or, building up your self-confidence or what have you, maybe if I start to show that, other people will feel like they can too. And
Yeah.
so
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so at the time, one of my direct reports on my team, they were really cute. They were encouraging me to do it. They're like, what you do that's different is you create a safe space for us to show up, like in our meetings. They're like, what could be really cool is if you figure out a way to create a safe space for other people to show up on there too. So like my voice that I started with was literally just the things sometimes that I had to tell myself throughout the day as my advice to myself would turn into a post. Or when I had a one-on-one with somebody on my team, sometimes we'd be talking and it would be like a very real moment. And bless one of them, Julie, shout out to her if she hears this. She'd sometimes turn around, she's like, that's a post. Where it was just those real moments that we had happening in our day where we needed that like at a girl moment. So that's how I found my voice. It turned out it was my voice in my real life all the time. I just had to be brave enough to use my real voice on the platform. And I knew that's the only way I could do it is if I was authentic to me, because I was never going to be able to say, here's 3 ways to be perfect. It's just not, I don't believe it. So that's how I started.
Yeah, I think the authentic part is the key part. And I've always done this similar thing where I'll get off the phone with somebody. I'm like, that's a post. And rip from the headlines, like it's a real thing. Even this conversation today was observing like, that was really an effective job search process. What can we take from that? So I think it allows the content to be authentic, which people don't want stuff that's ripped from ChatGPT or just feels very biz devy, or they want authentic and they want real valuable content. So I think I love your approach to that. So I want to ask you probably some maybe speculative questions, but of all the things you've done, I think, what do you think most directly help your job search? And we touched on it a little bit about the postings, the network, and also what things maybe just didn't help that much that maybe surprised you.
Yeah, so I think things that definitely worked was because I was sharing my learnings along the way. So when I'd actually struggle with something in a meeting and then I'd post about what I struggled with and what I did to overcome it, whether that was a business problem or other, When people were reading my content, it created this authenticity for sure. But you also start to get credibility
Mm.
because it's like, no, no, you're not coming at this from an academic perspective. Like, you've been in this, you're in the trenches, you're experiencing the real hard stuff. You don't have a team of 30 people, you're doing it by yourself and you get it. So I think it definitely helped the authenticity and the credibility. Using my voice and like, this, I'm like pretty decently dorky. Um, I make stupid faces a lot. I will be silly and do a lot of funny things. And I think even just doing those things starts to build a brand for who you are, especially if you're a leader. Um, One of the interesting things was, when I was looking at companies, everybody goes to your LinkedIn, by the way, when you submit a resume. People were able to watch my recordings where I was talking about my philosophy on sales enablement. They were able to scroll through my content and see where I had said something about why I believe that DEIB is important, especially in leadership.
Yep.
And so it paints a fuller picture of who you are as a person. So those things all definitely help for sure. What didn't help? I mean, I would say like things like awards and that it might be counterintuitive, but that's not what list you're on or who highlights what about you that's external. It doesn't really matter. It's great, don't get me wrong. But if somebody is really trying to assess who you are you a good fit for their team? Are you the right person to drive the business forward and drive revenue and solve the problem they need to be solved? They're going to care about what motivates you, how you approach your work, how you approach teamwork, how you collaborate with others. They're not going to care
Yeah.
if a CI tool gave you an award for being the highest user of their product.
Yeah.
And so I would say focus on the job. More importantly, though, focus on the impact you make to the people around you. That's what matters more than anything. And share that. Share your passion, share your impact. Those are the things that I hear back from people all the time when we talk about this kind of topic, where and sometimes they'll pull from like a very real example. I had somebody do it to me today. He's like, well, remember, you don't believe in rogue missions for enablement. And I was like, you caught that on LinkedIn. I know you did, because I specifically had a clip where I said that. And he kind of chuckled. Well, you never know who's going to be on your hiring committee. You never know who's going to become your coworkers. This stuff matters. So be authentic to who you are, show up as who you are, and show the world that. That's my advice for people.
Yeah. Who's that genius you just quoted? Oh, that was me.
I was like, no wonder it sounded kind of ridiculous.
I like that. That's great. I think, and to emphasize your last point, I've of all the CROs leaders that I've worked with, I've never once heard them say, "Oh, they've won a lot of awards." Like that, it's just never once. It's cool, and I wouldn't clutter up your LinkedIn with that stuff because I think that's secondary to the job stuff that you've accomplished, and so I would sort of prioritize or position it accordingly. But what they do care about is exactly what you said of what have been your accomplishments, and do we align philosophically? And I think to your point, going back to your win sheet from a few months ago, like those things will be everything. And the more you can internalize them, learn them, and know how to use them in a compelling way, that's when you become dangerous. And so I think that's really solid advice. And I think you've dropped a lot of knowledge here. And again, I'll go back to my caveat. This is not formulaic. You can't do 1 + 2 and get 3 every single time. But I think everything that you've highlighted here is actionable and is real gold. And I think people can help their job search by following some of the advice. So thank you for your continued voice. You're always sharing with the community, and I think as part of the community, I appreciate that. And even here today, I think you gave some people some real gold.
Thank you. Thank you. We can all enable each other. Cheesy tagline incoming: enablement for enablement, everybody. Let's help
There
each
you
other.
go. All right. Thanks, everybody.